$400,000 and a retirement calculator will tell you you're fine. $400,000 and a 30-year actuarial table will make you rethink your timeline. And $400,000 in the wrong market year with the wrong withdrawal sequence and a healthcare gap before Medicare, that's a pressure test. Most retirement plans fail quietly, invisibly, in year 7 or 8, right when it's too late to make the adjustments that would have actually mattered. The 4% rule says you can withdraw $16,000 a year from $400,000 more or less indefinitely. That's $1,333 per month before income taxes on those withdrawals, before healthcare premiums, before inflation halves its real purchasing power over the next 23 years, and before the single most documented destroyer of retirement portfolios, something your financial advisor may have mentioned once, briefly, in the vaguest possible terms, before moving on to show you a pie chart. So here is what this video actually is. I'm going to walk you through 4 specific mechanisms that make $400,000 behave very differently than it looks on paper, not to depress you, but because understanding the actual failure modes is the only way to build a plan that survives them. And I'm going to show you the 3 adjustments that separate people who retire on $400,000 and stay retired from people who retire on $400,000, have a couple of nice years, and then quietly rejoin the workforce and tell everyone it was a consulting opportunity they just couldn't pass up. Let's start with what this number actually means in context. The Federal Reserve's 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances puts the median retirement savings for American households aged 55 to 64 at approximately $185,000. $400,000 puts you ahead of the majority of people approaching retirement in this country. I want to say that clearly because this video isn't about dismissing what you've built. It's about the gap between better than most and actually covered. Right? Those are 2 different addresses, and the financial industry has been quietly forwarding the mail between them for years. I want you to think of your retirement savings as a campfire. You spent your career collecting firewood. $400,000 is a solid pile, genuinely solid. On the first cold night, you sit down next to it, light it up, and feel a warmth you have been working toward for decades. But there are 4 specific threats to this campfire that nobody draws on the map. Wind, wet wood, a longer night than you planned for, and the fire eating through the pile faster than the clock suggests it should. Every escalation in this video is a different version of the same question. How long is the night? And what is quietly consuming your wood? In a few minutes, I'm going to show you something about market timing that will reframe everything you thought you understood about withdrawal strategies. But first, let me show you why the campfire is already smaller than the pile appears. Here is a story. In 2001, a school district administrator in Ohio retired at 62. She had $420,000 in retirement accounts and a paid-off house. Her financial planner told her she was in excellent shape. She claimed Social Security at 62, which locked in a reduced benefit of approximately $1,200 per month. She withdrew 4% of her portfolio, $16,800 annually. Combined with Social Security, she had roughly $31,000 a year. In 2001, in a small Ohio city with no mortgage, that was workable. By 2011, her grocery bill was about 30% higher. Her property taxes had risen 43% over the decade. Her car insurance, her utility bills, her prescription medications, all substantially higher. She was drawing the same nominal dollar amount from a portfolio that had been hit by 2 separate market crashes. She was not broke, but the margin was shrinking every year in a way she had never modeled, and the walls were moving slowly enough that she didn't see them closing until they were close. That is inflation, not the headline-grabbing kind. The persistent, compounding, invisible kind that functions like a slow leak in your campfire's fuel supply. Here's the number that should genuinely make you uncomfortable. At 3% annual inflation, close to the historical average, and below where we were between 2021 and 2023, the purchasing power of $400,000 is approximately halved in 23 years. Retire at 62, reach 85, and the dollars you're spending by half what they bought on day one. The Social Security Administration's own actuarial data shows that a healthy 62-year-old woman has roughly a 32% chance of reaching 90. A healthy 62-year-old man has about a 24% chance. You are not planning for the average. You are planning for a distribution, and the right tail of that distribution is long. But here's where the inflation problem becomes more specific and more damaging than the general number suggests. The things retirees actually spend money on inflate faster than the standard consumer price index. The Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes the CPIE, the Consumer Price Index for the elderly, and it has historically run about 0.2 to 0.3% higher annually than the headline CPI. Medical care inflation has averaged closer to 5% annually over the past 2 decades. Housing in retirement-friendly Sunbelt markets has dramatically outpaced general inflation. And here is the structural cruelty. Your personal inflation rate accelerates as you age. The first decade of retirement is relatively inexpensive. The final decade is expensive in ways that are almost impossible to model in advance. The campfire burns slowest right when you feel most secure, and fastest right when you no longer have the energy to go out and collect more wood. Standard retirement calculators smooth this entirely. They apply a flat 2.5% inflation assumption across 30 years and produce a clean, reassuring projection. That line is mathematical fiction. Real retirement spending is front-loaded with lifestyle costs in the early years and back-loaded with healthcare spending in the later years, and neither of those curves matches the flat assumption the calculator is using. I want you to keep someone in mind for the rest of this video. Call him Dave. He is 58 years old, mechanical engineer, has been with the same industrial manufacturer for 22 years. Dave has $400,000 in his 401k, a house with $120,000 in equity, no debt. He is planning to retire at 62. He has a spreadsheet. His spreadsheet says he is fine. Dave is not in a hopeless situation. I want to be clear about that. But his spreadsheet contains 4 assumptions that are going to create serious problems unless someone flags them. I'll come back to Dave throughout this video. By the end, I'll show you exactly what he needs to change and how much time he still has to change it. Stay with me, because what comes next makes the inflation problem look minor. The sequence of your returns matters as much as their average, and the evidence for this is genuinely striking. 2 brothers retire in the same year with the same amount of money, $400,000 each. Same fund, same asset allocation. Over the following 12 years, that fund produces an identical average annual return of 7%. Identical portfolios, identical average performance. Brother 1 is comfortable at 70. Brother 2 is calling his adult son about the spare bedroom. How? Brother 1 retired into a year when markets gained 12%, then 15%, then 9%, then had a significant crash, then recovered. When the crash arrived, his portfolio had grown to approximately $465,000. The drop was painful, but didn't devastate him. Brother 2 retired into a year when markets fell 28% immediately. $400,000 became $288,000. He then withdrew $16,000 in year 1, bringing the balance to $272,000. He now needs markets to recover from a depleted base while simultaneously pulling $16,000 per year out of it. The same 7% average return applied to a portfolio that never fully stabilized produces a radically different endpoint. One brother has money, the other has memories of a plan that looked correct on paper. Researchers call this sequence of returns risk. Michael Kitces, one of the most rigorous researchers in the financial planning field, has published work showing that the first decade of returns is the dominant predictor of retirement portfolio survival. More predictive than total return, more predictive than savings rate, more predictive than withdrawal rate. The campfire that gets hit by rain in the first hour of the night never fully recovers, no matter how much dry wood you add at 2 in the morning. Here is a documented historical entry point that illustrates this precisely. Someone who retired at the beginning of 2000, the peak of the dot-com bubble, with a standard 60-40 portfolio and 4% annual withdrawals, faced the following sequence. The S&P 500 declined approximately 49% between March 2000 and October 2002, then recovered partially, then fell approximately 57% during 2008 and into 2009. If you were withdrawing through both crashes, you were selling equity units at half their price units that later recovered fully and then some. Those sold units are gone permanently. The compounding growth they would have generated over the following decade is gone too. It is not a paper loss that reverses when the market recovers. It is a structural depletion that cannot be undone. You think the problem is bad average returns. The problem is actually the timing of when bad returns occur relative to when you begin withdrawing. The original Trinity study, published in 1998 by Cooley, Hubbard, and Walls, found approximately a 95% success rate over a 30-year retirement using a 4% withdrawal on a mixed portfolio. That sounds reassuring until you understand that the 5% failure cases were not randomly distributed across history. They were clustered around specific entry points, particularly the late 1960s and the stagflation period running from approximately 1966 through 1982. Those retirees didn't do anything wrong, they just retired at the wrong time. And no amount of discipline or frugality could fix a bad sequence of early returns once the withdrawals were already depleting a declining base. You don't get to choose when the market cooperates. You retire when life allows you to retire. By the way, hit subscribe if you want to keep seeing this kind of research broken down into something usable. YouTube's algorithm may never surface this channel for you again otherwise. Here's the honest part that rarely makes it into a retirement planning conversation. I spent a significant amount of time going through 50 years of retirement data trying to understand the failure patterns, specifically why people who had enough money, who did everything the conventional advice told them to do, still ended up back at work or running structurally short in their late 70s. The answer almost always came back to one of two things: a bad sequence of returns in the first 3 to 5 years of retirement, or a category of costs that was either ignored or dramatically underestimated in the plan. I call that second category the invisible bill. Knowing what these failure modes are and actually building a system designed to withstand them are two completely different things. I know this because I had the data for a long time before I finally built the framework I needed. So I put together a digital book called The Exit Code. 8 chapters of research on 50 years of actual retirement data. No filler, no motivational content, no generic advice. One of the core frameworks it covers is what I call the dynamic withdrawal method, a rules-based system for adjusting your withdrawals during down market years without disrupting your income, specifically designed to address sequence of returns risk. Instead of mechanically withdrawing 4% regardless of what the market is doing, the dynamic withdrawal method gives you a systematic approach that has historically extended portfolio survival across the worst documented entry points. It doesn't require you to time the market. It requires you to not ignore the market when it's down. The Exit Code also covers the $14,000 invisible bill, the real annual healthcare cost that hits people who retire before 65 and lose employer coverage. That number is derived from actual marketplace premium data for a 59-year-old individual on a silver tier plan in a mid-cost state, before deductibles or out-of-pocket exposure. Most retirement plans either skip this line item entirely or use a placeholder that dramatically understates the actual cost. You can access the Exit Code through the link in the description for less than dinner for two at a mediocre restaurant. The research is available. The question is whether you want it before you need it or after. Now let me show you what the invisible bill actually looks like when it shows up at the door. Here is a scenario that plays out more often than the retirement industry cares to discuss openly. You are 59, your company restructures yours, or one of the thousands like it that restructure every year in every mid-sized American city. They offer a buyout after 20 plus years of service. The severance is reasonable. Your portfolio is at 400,000. You think maybe this is the moment. Maybe this is early retirement rather than a layoff with better framing. The day you accept that offer, your employer healthcare coverage ends. Cobra lets you continue coverage for up to 18 months at full cost, both your premium contribution and your employer's contribution, plus a 2% administrative fee. For a 59-year-old individual, Cobra commonly runs $1,200 to $1,600 per month, depending on your plan and location. For a couple, it regularly exceeds $2,000 monthly. After 18 months, COBRA expires. You move to the marketplace. The Kaiser Family Foundation tracked benchmark premium data through 2024. For a 60-year-old individual on a marketplace silver plan, the average unsubsidized annual premium was approximately $9,600, $800 per month before a single medical appointment. The out-of-pocket maximum for marketplace plans in 2025 can reach $8,950 for an individual. In a serious health year, a hospital stay, a diagnosis, a surgery, you are looking at $18,000 in combined healthcare costs. From a portfolio generating $16,000 in annual withdrawals, before groceries, before property taxes, before your car requires anything unexpected. This is the campfire metaphor made literal. The wind has a name. The name is the gap between your last day of employer coverage and your first day of Medicare eligibility at 65. 6 years. In some early retirement scenarios, closer to 10, these are the most expensive insurance years of your life because you are old enough that coverage carries real actuarial costs, but young enough to be completely ineligible for the program designed to make that cost manageable. Once you reach 65 and Medicare begins, the costs don't disappear, they transform. Medicare Part B premiums in 2025 are $185 per month per person, totaling $2,220 annually per individual. Part D, prescription drug coverage, adds more. Most Medicare beneficiaries also purchase Medigap supplemental coverage, which can cost between $150 and $350 per month, depending on plan type and location. For a couple, combined baseline Medicare costs can easily run $5,000 to $7,000 annually in premiums alone, before any actual healthcare is consumed. And then there's the IRMA trap, which almost nobody models in advance. If your modified adjusted gross income exceeds $106,000 for a single filer or $212,000 for a married couple filing jointly, you pay higher Medicare Part B and Part D premiums through the income-related monthly adjustment amount surcharge. The jump at the first income threshold is not trivial. What this means is that your portfolio withdrawal strategy doesn't just affect your tax liability, it directly and mechanically affects your healthcare premiums. These two systems are connected in a way that most financial plans treat as separate, and that separation is expensive. Fidelity's 2024 estimate for total healthcare expenses in retirement from 65 onward on Medicare, not including any long-term care, is $315,000 for a couple. $315,000 from a $400,000 portfolio. That is before long-term care enters the picture. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has estimated that approximately 70% of people over 65 will require some form of long-term care at some point. The Genworth Cost of Care Survey placed the median annual cost of a private nursing facility room in 2024 at approximately $108,000. The median duration of a long-term care need is roughly 2.5 years. That is roughly $270,000 in potential future costs in today's dollars that are not in your retirement plan unless you put them there deliberately. Long-term care insurance purchased at 60 is expensive because the insurers have access to the same actuarial tables you don't. If you wait until you need the coverage, you are disqualified from obtaining it. The financial architecture here is not designed in your favor. That is not a conspiracy. It is just the math of how insurance markets work. The campfire is burning on multiple fronts simultaneously, and most retirement plans are only looking at one of them. Let me show you the fourth leak. This one is different from the others because it does not live in a spreadsheet. It lives inside the person running the retirement. A research survey of the FIRE community people who had achieved financial independence and retired early, with a median retirement age around 52, found that at the 2.5-year mark, 81% had returned to some form of paid work. Not because they ran out of money. The financial infrastructure had worked. They returned because they ran out of identity. The portfolio survived. The person didn't know what to do next. The Stanford Center on Longevity has published research on what happens cognitively when 40 years of work structure are abruptly removed. Deadlines, social contact, professional hierarchy, feedback loops, the cognitive load of a complex and meaningful job, these are not merely features of employment. They are the organizing architecture the brain has used to process experience since your mid-20s. Remove that architecture without replacing it with something intentional, and something resembling clinical depression can emerge within the first 18 to 24 months, even in people with sufficient savings, strong social networks, and good physical health. This is not a reason to stay at work. It is a reason to design the life you're retiring into, not only the financial plan you're retiring from. But here is where psychology becomes a budget problem. People navigating a genuine psychological transition in early retirement don't follow their withdrawal schedules. They travel more because travel is the thing they spent 40 years promising themselves, and finally doing it feels like both a reward and a distraction. They renovate. They quietly help adult children with down payments without formally updating their retirement model. These are not reckless people. These are people self-medicating a real structural problem with the only tool they have spent a lifetime trusting. Research tracking retiree spending patterns in the first 3 years found that actual expenditures routinely exceeded projected spending by 20 to 30% during years 1 through 3, before normalizing back toward plan by year 4 or 5. On a $400,000 portfolio, a 20% overspend in year 1 represents $80,000 in additional withdrawals. That is $80,000 that is no longer in the market recovering. If those withdrawals happen in a down year, which they often do, because portfolio anxiety and behavioral drift both spike during market stress, you have just created a sequence of returns event entirely through behavioral drift rather than investment error. The inverse failure mode is equally damaging over a long horizon, and I find it just as common. Some retirees become so terrified of portfolio exhaustion that they spend almost nothing. They have $400,000 and live as though they have $40,000. Every restaurant bill triggers an internal calculation. Every discretionary purchase feels like a compounding error. They are technically solvent. They are not retired in any meaningful sense. They are living in permanent pre-retirement anxiety with a different job title and no commute. The campfire is burning. They're sitting 12 feet away from it, afraid to get too close, slowly getting cold. Both failure modes are expensive. The overspenders deplete the portfolio through behavioral volatility and bad withdrawal timing. The underspenders develop chronic stress, which the medical literature has associated with measurable increases in health deterioration over 5 to 10-year windows, which then produces the large medical costs they were paradoxically trying to prevent. Different roads, same destination. And then there is the advisor fee problem, which I want to be precise about because the math deserves full exposure. Most Americans with meaningful retirement savings are paying approximately 1% annually in management fees. On $400,000, that is $4,000 in year 1, growing as the portfolio grows. A 1% annual fee on a portfolio compounding at 7% over 30 years does not merely cost you 1% per year. Because the fee compounds against you while your returns compound for you, Vanguard's research estimates that a 1% fee differential costs approximately 23 to 25% of your ending portfolio value over 30 years. On a portfolio that would have grown to $3 million at 7%, 1% in annual fees represents somewhere between $600,000 and $750,000 in lost compounding over the full period. Not $1 of that goes toward your retirement. It goes towards someone else's income. This is not a conspiracy. It is just incentives. The advisor charging 1.2% annually has a financial incentive to keep you dependent on their active management, to keep you slightly uncertain about self-directing, to not say a 3-fund index portfolio with annual rebalancing would serve your situation at approximately 1/15 the cost. That conversation ends the engagement. Most advisors are not bad people. They are simply operating inside an incentive structure that is subtly misaligned with your long-term financial interests, and the compounding math makes that misalignment very expensive over time. At some point, a financial planner is going to watch this video and send me a strongly worded email about oversimplification. That same financial planner charges 1.2% annually to put clients in a target date fund. You can access for under 0.2% in expense ratios through any major discount brokerage. And the retirement calculator will confirm you're fine, your neighbor will say he's heard good things about his guy, and then year 3 will arrive. And the spreadsheet will not come over for dinner to help explain the numbers. Let me put specific numbers around all of this. Let me give you Margaret. Margaret is 63. She has $400,000, 60% in a broad market equity index fund, 40% in a bond fund, standard target allocation for her age. She plans to withdraw $16,000 annually from the portfolio and supplement that with Social Security income of $15,600 per year. Total household income, $31,600 annually. She owns her home outright. Property taxes are manageable. Year 1 is fine. Markets are up 9%. Her portfolio grows from $400,000 to approximately $420,000. Even after withdrawals, she takes a trip she had been postponing for a decade. Year 2, a meaningful correction arrives. Markets fall 23%. Her $420,000 drops to $323,400. She withdraws $16,000. $307,400 remains. $16,000 is now a 5.2% withdrawal rate on the new lower balance. She doesn't adjust because her plan said 4% and she is following the plan. The plan doesn't know what year it is. Year 3, recovery markets return 16%. Portfolio climbs from $307,400 to approximately $356,600. She withdraws $16,000, $340,600. By year 7, Margaret's portfolio is running approximately $50,000 behind where a smooth 7% return model would have placed it. That gap compounds. By year 15, Margaret is now 78. The gap has grown to something closer to $120,000. And her portfolio exhaustion date has shifted from theoretical never to somewhere in her late 80s. Not broke at 78, stressed at 78, running out of margin. Now here is Margaret with one structural adjustment. In year 2, the down year, instead of withdrawing the full $16,000, she pulls $12,000 from the portfolio and covers the remaining $4,000 from a cash buffer she built specifically for this scenario. $4,000. That is the difference between selling equity at a market bottom and allowing equity to recover. The shares she does not sell at the bottom more than double in value over the following 7 years. She replenishes the cash buffer in the recovery years. Her portfolio survival extends by a decade. From a $4,000 decision made in a single down year, the campfire doesn't need more wood. It needs someone watching it during the storm. Here are the 3 specific levers that determine whether $400,000 is a retirement or a 10-year runway with an expiration date. Lever 1, Social Security timing. This is the most valuable free option inside the American retirement system, and the majority of Americans cash it in early because they are scared of dying before break even or because they simply need the income now. For every year you delay claiming Social Security past your full retirement age, which is 67 for anyone born in 1960 or after, your benefit increases by 8%, guaranteed, inflation adjusted, with no market risk attached. That is an investment return that does not exist in any brokerage account. Delaying from 62 to 70 increases your monthly benefit by approximately 76% relative to early claiming. On a benefit that would have been $14,400 annually at 62, the delayed benefit at 70 is approximately $25,200 annually for life, adjusted for inflation. Over a 25-year retirement, the cumulative difference in lifetime Social Security income from this single timing decision can exceed $120,000. That is not a rounding error. That is a lever that outperforms most active investment strategies at zero cost and zero risk. The counterargument is always, what if I die early and never collect the delayed premium? Fair. The break-even point on delayed claiming compared to early claiming is typically around age 80. If you live past 80, and statistically, a healthy 62-year-old has a better chance of this than most people acknowledge, the delayed strategy pays a permanent premium for every remaining year. The people who most need this strategy are precisely the ones with thinner savings cushions, because guaranteed inflation-protected income matters most when your portfolio margin is narrowest. Lever 2, the cash buffer, not just bonds. Conventional wisdom says hold bonds to reduce portfolio volatility. Bonds are fine. But a specific 12 to 18-month reserve of living expenses held in a high-yield savings account or a short-term treasury ladder outside the investment portfolio serves a more precise function. It prevents forced equity selling during downturns. When markets fall significantly in any given year, you do not touch the investment portfolio. You live on the cash. You let equities recover. You replenish the buffer during recovery years. This structural decision costs almost nothing to implement and addresses sequence of returns risk directly and mechanically. It is the single most documented low-complexity tool for improving portfolio survival outcomes across bad entry point scenarios, and most people either don't implement it or implement a version so complicated it falls apart under real-world conditions. Lever 3, healthcare modeled accurately and in advance. Get a real quote for marketplace coverage at your actual intended retirement age, in your actual state, at your actual projected income level. Understand where the subsidy thresholds sit and how your portfolio withdrawal structure affects your eligibility. Price out COBRA if you're separating from an employer before 65 and know the monthly cost before you accept the offer. Model Medicare Part B, Part D, and supplemental coverage costs as real line items in your post-65 budget. Understand the IRMAA thresholds and whether your planned withdrawal amounts push you above them. This sounds like a significant undertaking, but it is, realistically, 2 to 3 hours with a fee-only tax professional, not a commission-based advisor that can prevent tens of thousands of dollars in unplanned costs from ambushing you in the gap years. Dave, $58,400,000 in the 401k, planning to retire at 62, has 4 years. 4 years is enough time to make every one of these adjustments. He can decide now to delay Social Security until at least 67 rather than claiming at 62, which alone improves his lifetime income by a meaningful margin. He can start building a 12-month cash buffer between now and retirement, directing savings outside the 401k into a high-yield account that becomes his shock absorber against a bad first year. He can get a real healthcare projection for his 62 to 65 years and price it into his plan as an actual number rather than an assumption. And he can stop paying whatever his 401k management fees are costing him and move to a simple, low-cost index allocation that stops bleeding him on compounding drag. Dave's spreadsheet said he was fine. After these 4 adjustments, Dave actually is fine. Not theoretical spreadsheet fine. Structurally, mechanically fine with margin, with a weather forecast, with someone watching the campfire during the night. The campfire doesn't have to burn out. You just have to stop pretending the night is shorter than it actually is and stop standing over the pile wondering why it's getting smaller while you watch. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. $400,000 will retire you. It will also surprise you 3 or 4 times in ways you did not model, through mechanisms that are genuinely predictable if you know what to look for. The inflation will be slower and less dramatic than the fear, but longer. The sequence of returns risk will feel random and cruel, but has well-documented structural fixes. The healthcare gap will arrive with a specific dollar amount that you could have calculated 2 years before it mattered. And the psychological transition will be the one nobody warned you about, which makes it the most disorienting of all. The good news is none of these are surprises. They've happened to documented cohorts of people, in documented ways, with documented outcomes. The map exists. Most people just never got a copy.